Yes people, welcome to the track breakdown of Bling. In this video we're going to be focusing on the bass line. This is how it sounds all together. So this is made up of multiple layers of massive with a sub made in Serum, the stock filter plugin in Logic. It doesn't matter which DAW you're using, you should be able to make this sound yourself. On the top layer we've got massive, giving us some weird sort of fluttery hum, and then we've got this noisy saw wave underneath. So now I resampled that a couple times and put it through some weird filters. Just to add a bit of depth, and then lastly we've got the sub at the bottom. So let's start with the first sound here. It's a patch made in Massive, routed through Serum effects, Logic's auto filter, and then just a bit of EQ. I'm just going to turn these off. That will leave us with just the Massive patch. So we start with a sine wave pitched at -36. If I play this back, you can't actually hear anything. But notice how we're still getting some sub frequencies on the EQ there. I've just had to change the view down to like -70 just so we can see it. So there is noise happening, we just can't hear it yet. If I turn on the filter, that then boosts some frequencies in the sort of 200 to 400 range there. I've turned up the resonance as well, and I've put an LFO on it just so that resonance keeps changing over time. You'll see it in action once we start adding more stuff in. Turned on the feedback just so it's boosted a little bit more, and then if I turn on the C-tube saturation, you can see that that essentially compresses and distorts the sound at the same time, and we start getting loads more harmonics in up there. Couple that with the S-shaper, which is a wave shaper insert, and now the sound is really brightening up. Let's add in some noise just for some extra hiss at the top end. Lastly, I'll just dip it in some reverb to add some subtle width and depth to the sound. So if you've done this yourself, have a go at changing the pitch of the oscillator and notice what happens to the sound. So you get some interesting tonal changes just from changing the pitch there, but you don't lose the actual pitch of the note. That comes from the filter here. Because it's boosting those frequencies so intensely, it creates this hum. That kind of becomes the pitch of the synth, if that makes sense. So next up we got the Serum effects plugin, which is really useful. If you bought Serum or if you rent it, you should be able to get this plugin. Essentially allows you to use the effects rack but as a standalone plugin. So you can put Massive through Serum, or you can put Phase Plant through Serum, or your drums through Serum. So we start off with the Combs filter. It just kind of gives the sound a really metallic feel to it. If I turn that on, essentially a comb filter is a filter that's shaped like a comb, and I've put a LFO on there just so it kind of changes in frequency over time. So we're literally combing the sound right now. Next up I've added some distortion here on the 0 square setting just to kind of brighten up those higher frequencies even more. Next up we've got the compressor, which I've set to multiband. It just absolutely squeezes it. And then lastly we've got the delay here, just to add some extra width and depth to the sound. So right now it's sounding a little bit harsh. I'm just going to shape it slightly using Logic's auto filter. Just a slight high end cutoff to dull the sound, and then I've modulated that with the LFO. And I've buffed it up slightly with just a little bit of distortion there. The last step is to just cut out that low end there in the EQ, just to make room for the other layers and the sub. Cool, so for this layer, I'm essentially just a duplicate of the first patch with almost everything left the same, except for a few minor tweaks. On massive, we've got the square saw 1 oscillator pitched at 0, and then we've got the double notch filter again, set to a lower cutoff frequency, and the resonance has been turned down, and the feedback's been turned off as well. So on Serum Effects, all I've done is basically turned off the delay, kept the distortion and the compression there, and then I've swapped the filter to the phase 36 plus setting. Just kind of gives it this sort of nasally tone. So on the autofill, I've turned off the actual filter, but I've kept some of the distortion there, just so it's beefed up slightly. On the EQ, you'll see the sound kind of occupies more of this lower end region here, as opposed to the first patch, which is slightly higher. When you play them together, it just makes for a slightly fuller sound that kind of fills the space a bit more. So the next 3 layers are essentially just the first patch but resampled and put through Serum Effects again. This first one is essentially just the start of the patch, but it's been put through the reverb filter there. The reverb filter is really cool. It's like a filter and a reverb mixed into one. If you turn up the resonance there, that just kind of elongates the release of it. Still kind of has that sort of metallic feel like the Combs filter. Next up, we've got the rest of the sound here, going through Serum Effects again, except this time I've added the Comb Plus filter with the resonance turned up. It creates this sort of weird metallic shimmer, and then I've just topped that off with a little bit more distortion there, just make it sizzle out a bit. For this layer here, it's essentially the patch in reverse. It just kind of helps sort of tail off the end of the riff. All those elements together just create this really nice sort of sense of fluidity and movement in the sound. So lastly, we've just got the sub layer at the bottom. This is just the sub oscillator in Serum. And then all together,